Hello, St. Margaret Mary's family. My name is Will Targy, and I am a seminarian for the Archdiocese of Omaha. You've probably seen me around the parish a bit, and I'm spending a year here at the parish as a seminarian intern. I grew up at St. Mary's Parish in Bellevue, and I study at Kenrick Seminary down in St. Louis. So this year I had the opportunity to just be with the parish and experience all the ins and outs of the life of a priest and get to know people who are here in the parish and the various ministries. So I'm really enjoying that. In May, I just finished my second year of theology. And then after my time here at St. Margaret Mary, I'll return to Kenrick in St. Louis for 2 more years of formation before I'm ordained, God willing, to the priesthood in June of 2025. I grew up Catholic, and at St. Mary's in Bellevue, I went to the grade school there, and I attended Gross Catholic High School. And so our family faith was a big part of our life, of going to Mass on Sundays, of praying before meals, of celebrating the different liturgical seasons of Advent and Lent. Of course, we were having all of that reinforced at school, and it was just a part of who we were as a family, as part of our family culture, if you will. And I'm really thankful for my parents for giving that to us. Myself and my 4 sisters, and giving us a good foundation of morals and just living well and being a good person. And so as I got older and I was in high school and involved in different things at Gross, I began to kind of ask the bigger questions about who God was for me, and who I was in relation to who God was. And as those questions kind of deepened and I began to look at my life and sort of the next plans and looking at college and career and all that kind of thing, those questions were still very foundational for me as I moved along in my time in school. And so when I got to college, I went to UNO, and I continued to kind of ask those questions and seek answers in various ways, but it wasn't until about halfway through my career that I ran into Focus missionaries on campus at UNO, and they were living a very vibrant and fruitful and faithful life. They had something that I didn't have at the time, but I wanted it, and so I was curious, and it really drew me in. And from there, the missionaries just introduced me to a life of prayer and kind of coming back to the sacraments on a regular basis, and just really encountering the Lord in a deeper way through His mercy, through His presence in my life, through the grace of the sacraments, through the grace of community. And so all of that was really drawing me in. When I graduated from UNO, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I was offered a job to work with Focus as a missionary. So I was able to go back to college campuses and do the same work that these missionaries had done for me when I was a student. So I spent 2 years at Mount St. Mary's University in Emmitsburg, Maryland. I spent my last year at James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Now, it was during my time at Mount St. Mary's, which also happens to have a major seminary attached to the university, that I really believe the seeds for priesthood were planted. Now, growing up, we had great priests, and I enjoyed serving Mass, and all of those things were important, but I never really thought very strongly about priesthood. It just didn't really come up in my life as a question. Not until I was in my maybe mid-20s did that really start to kind of take hold. And so through my time at Mount St. Mary's, I was hanging out with a lot of the seminarians and a lot of the priests that were on campus, getting to know them, getting to know their story, getting to know how God called them. And it just stirred something up for me. And even at the time, I don't know that I could always place it, but as I look back at it, it was certainly there. God was really working. And we also had a fantastic chaplain at the university that worked with our Focus team and our students. That was just really, really inspiring for me. So I left staff with Focus. I moved back to Bellevue, and I had the intention of discerning pretty intentionally during that time, but I also needed a job. So I worked with my home parish, St. Mary's, and I was the youth minister, so youth and young adult ministry, junior high, high school, all those things. So I worked there for 6 years. It was probably longer than I intended when I got there, but it was just how God worked and how things worked out. So while I was at the parish, some of the discernment and vocations stuff took a back burner to just the day in, day out work of the parish. But my last year, I felt very strongly in prayer. My last year of doing youth ministry, I felt the Lord really inviting me to consider going to seminary. Again, it wasn't that I knew 100% that I was called to priesthood, but it was an invitation to take the next step. And so for me, it was really all about, that whole year was all about God showing me the next step and then me being able to take it. It wasn't like I had the whole picture. I didn't have the whole puzzle put together. But God was asking me to trust in the next step. And all of that kind of just strung together and led me to entering the seminary in August of 2018. So I've always had a heart for ministry, as far back as I can remember. In high school, especially doing youth group at our home parish at St. Mary's, and being involved with various aspects of like pastoral counsel and service opportunities at Gross Catholic. And then when I got to college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do career-wise, and so I just kind of landed on studying religion and philosophy. I had no idea where that was going to take me after college, or how to make a career out of that necessarily, but it was something that I just really enjoyed learning about. And as I stated earlier, I hadn't really thought too much about priesthood at that point in my life, kind of growing up, but those foundational elements were there. And as I was working as a focus missionary, doing campus ministry, as I was doing parish ministry as a youth minister, so that the relationship, the proximity to the church and the Lord was always really there. And so I think the invitation for priesthood was just a deepening of what was already a familiar invitation and a familiar experience. It was just to really embrace a deeper call, a deeper identity of fatherhood. And as we discuss sort of marriage and family life, there's obviously a natural fatherhood, but in the priesthood there's a particular invitation to be a spiritual father, right? And I experienced a little bit of that as I was working with younger people in ministry, but in this particular way, an invitation to really lay down my life as a father, to be able to teach and protect and guide in a special way. And so all those elements were certainly there, and to be able to sort of at the crown of all of that is the gift of the sacraments. And so to be able to be an instrument, to be a channel of God's grace through the sacraments, was just, there was something there that was captivating for me. And again, as I go through my time in seminary, and as I continue to ask the Lord for clarity around all of this, continue to ask the Lord for wisdom and understanding of this call, that discernment is really ongoing. But the longer that I've spent, the more that I've been with the Lord in prayer and just asked this question, there's just a greater confidence and a greater peace on this path. I don't really remember if anyone spoke to me directly or individually about priesthood as I was growing up. I'm sure it maybe happened or in a larger group context, but it wasn't until, as I shared earlier, until after I got back from Focus and I was working full-time in ministry that call really became apparent, and I wanted to pursue that. But I'm very thankful. My parents have been very supportive since day one, as I shared with them the possibility of entering seminary and preparing for priesthood. And as word of that kind of got around a little bit in the parish where I was working at St. Mary's, more and more people were just really supportive of that. They were praying for me and my discernment as I was working with our young people and in different aspects of ministry. They were pointing things out to me about the connections between what I was doing and the potential for priesthood, all of that. And so there was a lot of encouragement, a lot of support, and I wanted to receive that as best I could, not allowing it to push me in one direction or the other, but just to know that I was supported and loved and encouraged in my parish community. And I think it was funny once I several years afterwards, as I was doing ministry for 6 years. So at the end of that, when I did make the steps necessary to enter seminary, I think the sentiment more or less was, well, it's about time. Right, and so it was. People had been very supportive and were walking with me on that journey, and I think for them it was, in some sense, kind of a relief. There was a lot of joy and all those things, but it was like, all right, it's happening now, and that's it was really great. Had a great sort of send off from the parish and all of that my first year of seminary. So I was just very blessed and continue to have support today from so many people. So I'm really thankful for that. If you've never had a chance to visit a seminary, you might have some ideas in your mind about what that actually looks like. For some people that I talked to even in my life as I was discerning, there was maybe this sort of funny, odd conception of a medieval sort of monastery with the robes and the Gregorian chant and the candles and the scrolls and parchment, all of that, which obviously is a caricature today. But I think some of those elements might still be present for some folks. So when I was able to visit Kenrick before I ended up entering seminary, I was able to see what life was actually like, at least for a couple days before I entered. And now as I look back, the last 4 years that I've spent there, I recognize all of the incredible gifts of seminary life. And there are various aspects of that experience, but all of them are geared towards helping the man become integrated, become healthy, to grow in his spiritual life. But at the end of the day, to always be listening to God. And related to all of that, sort of the spiritual life is the pillar of our time in seminary. Everything is really built on our prayer life and our experience of encountering the Lord in a deeper way, of meditating, of reading through Scripture, all of that. And so when I tell people about the seminary, and specifically at Kenrick, I tell them about our St. Joseph Chapel, which is the main chapel on campus, and this is the literal and figurative heart of the seminary, because Jesus is there, and we come there every day to encounter Him and to pray personally and communally. So that's where we come every day for our holy hour, for Mass, for our communal prayers. All of that is the place where we have a very deep and rich encounter with the Lord, because Jesus is present there in the Blessed Sacrament. Now, there is also a very strong and rigorous academic part of our seminary experience. So we're in classes during the week, and we're reading, we're preparing papers and preparing for exams. All those things are present. But the seminary does a really good job of encouraging us not to think about it just as collecting data for a future time, or just trying to get the best grade, but that we would really integrate what we're learning to be able to allow it to form who we are, and then also to be able to teach it to other people, to really to walk with people in their experience. They would know what the church teaches and why she teaches what she does, and the great gift and the beauty that comes from a deepening of our faith life, an enriching of our faith life is really present there. The other aspect of seminary that I really love is the community, the brotherhood that's present. We have guys from all over the country in different backgrounds, different experiences, coming together to live under one roof, all desiring the same goal, and that's principally listening to God. I know that not all the guys that I am in school with will eventually be ordained priests. Guys will discern out and discern other paths of life, and that's an incredible gift. But all of us are there with the intention of listening to God as best we can. And so that bringing us together, but sharing other interests too, whether it's around sports or food or games, all of the things that, all of the sort of the leisures of life that we enjoy, art, movies, books, all that's present there. And it's really healthy. It's healthy as for us as men to come to understand what are the things that we enjoy, what's life-giving for us in relationships, in activities, all of that, that will help us as we move forward in life. Now, kind of the final aspect of seminary life is our really our ministry, our pastoral application. And so at Kenrick, we're able to go out into the city, into the city of St. Louis, to different parishes and help serve Mass on Sundays, be involved with youth ministry, be involved with RCIA, be involved with their religious education programs, do communion calls. All of that is available to us to help us to kind of grow and have that experience of doing ministry in a particular way as we prepare for priesthood. And again, as I'm here this year, this is sort of a very in-depth, kind of full-on experience of pastoral ministry that I am here at the parish, just sort of living the life and getting the experience of all the various aspects of parish life and parish ministry. It's always a fun question to ask people how they hear God, how they experience God. It's obviously a very personal question, right? But I think it's very edifying for us to be able to share some aspect of that. And so as I've grown in my prayer life over the years, as I've grown more and more in spending time with God in silence, reading the scriptures in various other ways, I've come to understand that God's voice is always encouraging. It's always consoling, as a father's voice should be. It might invite us to do something that we're challenged by, but it's never demeaning, right? It's never meant to put fear in us in any way. So God's voice is meant to be personal and familiar for us. And so, as we know in our lives, in our world, we have a lot of noise around us. There's probably a lot of voices and different things that can kind of distract us and maybe influence how we see ourselves or how we see the world or all of that. But at the end of the day, God's voice is always drawing us back to Himself, that we would grow in a greater sense of love and charity and service, and that we would be moved outward, right? That our relationship with God is not just meant for ourselves, for us to sort of clutch and hold on to, but it's always moving us outwards towards the other, right? And that's what love does. It's meant to really move out of us. And so as we're growing in our relationship with the Lord, as we're seeking to listen to Him and really hear His call, to be able to see the places where I'm drawn to love and to serve, and to have that be sort of a framework for a particular vocation or a particular call, what it means, and to say, well, I have these specific gifts, and I am really energized and encouraged in these various experiences of ministry. I wonder what God might be calling me to in light of all of that. I know that I shouldn't be, but I'm often amazed at God's faithfulness. And I'm also just blown away by His involvement in the details of my life as I look back throughout my whole history, and to recognize where God's hand was at work. Some places I would maybe easily recognize, but I would say a lot of places I didn't see it at the time, or even now. There's so many things that I would look at to say, I know God's there somewhere, but I don't exactly know how that all works, and we won't know until we're in heaven, to see the working of God's grace and all the people and the experiences that He's brought together to really form us and shape us, and ultimately to draw us closer to Himself. And so it's a great gift. It's a great encouragement. And as I was growing in trust and growing in saying yes to God, especially with the gift of priesthood and preparing for that, I was able to see more and more of God at work, and knowing that all the things in my past and all the experiences of ministry and all of the relationships and all of that, God was using or was going to use for me in the future. And so to knowing that like nothing is wasted, for God. St. Paul tells us that God brings about good for all who love him. So good in all things. It's amazing that when we say yes to the Lord, how he really uses those gifts to really amplify what he wants to do in the world, to build the kingdom. So my advice to anyone who is considering or praying about a call to priesthood or religious life, first of all, is to not be afraid. To know that the desires that God places on our heart and all the things that he has brought into our life, he desires our happiness and fulfillment and all of that. And so knowing that if you are called, if you do experience a call, that you will be incredibly fulfilled in your life in saying yes to God and to making a gift of yourself in that particular way, and knowing that God is going to be with you and walk with you and give you an abundance of grace to say yes to whatever that call is. So first of all, to not be afraid of that, to trust. The second thing would be, if you don't already have a prayer life, a consistent prayer life, I would encourage you, whatever that looks like, whether it's starting at 10 minutes or if you're doing 10 or 15 minutes, bump it up to 30 minutes or whatever it is. But just making sure that in your day, in your schedule, you have a prominent place for God and you, one-on-one, time in prayer. And of course, inviting the Lord into everything that we do every day, but to have this special place, whether it's first thing in the morning or at lunch or before you go to bed, whatever it looks like, that you're intentional about, as best you can, getting rid of the distractions and noises around you and just really focusing and allowing God to speak to you, right? And so in that silence and that time in prayer, just resting and being with God, I think is really important. And then I would say, find out more information. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to talk to priests and sisters and nuns, just to hear about their experience. As I said earlier, that was it for me when I would talk to the seminarians and talk to the priests, and I just hear about their lives and all the different ways that God had brought them here. Was just really inspiring for me. And so to be able to take time to find out more about people's own individual call, their personal call, and then to take a visit to a seminary, take a visit to a convent, whatever that looks like, and just again be able to not to close any doors unnecessarily, but continue to invite God in and give him opportunities to make something more clear in your life. So when God calls us, he's not calling some ideal version of us, some better version of us. He's calling us as we are, and we trust that he's giving us the grace and will give us the grace to respond, right? But he's loving us unconditionally and inviting us as we are right now to follow him more closely, to follow him more deeply. And so I think one of the beautiful things, if you run into priests, you run into religious sisters or religious brothers, there's an incredible joy about them because they're living an authentic life. They are close to the Lord. They are experiencing his love. They're experiencing his work in their life. But at the same time, they're totally themselves. They're totally comfortable in their own skin because that's who God has called. And that's really how he's using their gifts and all their experiences and their times funny personality, quirks and different things, all that which makes them who they are. And God uses that for his glory and to build the kingdom. And so not to be afraid that to say yes to a particular call, a vocation, is going to change who you are. Like, God made you as you are, and he loves you as you are. And he's going to continue to give you the grace to live out that call and that vocation, but not as somebody else, as you are.